Joseph King of Dreams is my favorite Batman movie. This is one of their 2D animated films, most of which are pretty good, though this one is the prequel sequel to DreamWorks' second animated feature film, The Prince of Egypt. Both movies are based off of the early stories of the Old Testament, Joseph King of Dreams being the very end of Genesis, while Prince of Egypt is what continues in the following book of Exodus. If I ever make a video about my top 10 favorite animated films, expect to see Prince of Egypt on there. It's that good of a movie. It's not a perfect movie, as some of the casting choices are a little weird, some of the songs can be a little weak, but overall it stands as an excellent, wonderfully crafted animated musical. And from DreamWorks, no less. This was a ballsy movie to make, considering the tone it has. Hell, the opening scene of the film is the retelling of when the Egyptians slaughtered all the Jewish babies. Then the rest of the film is practically chronicling the tale of Val Kilmer's Moses and his manslaughter charges by using God to torture, starve, and smite Egypt with the wrath of God and killing hundreds.
Just like the real Val Kilmer.
The 2D films are worth talking about on this channel one day, and maybe even one massive video, but Prince of Egypt stands as one of the best DreamWorks films of all time. And I guess they wanted to capture that success with another movie with weird casting choices. Now, I've always wanted to revisit this movie since The Prince of Manslaughter is so dear to my heart that I would need to see how this sequel holds up, and I used to watch Joseph King of Memes a lot as a child. I will be comparing the movies as we go, since recapturing the magic of the original is such a task in and of itself, and it's to be expected. The film follows the story of Joseph, obviously, and from what I've skimmed over in Genesis, the story is mostly accurate where it counts. I'll touch up on the funny stuff later, though. Jacob's second wife, Rachel, gives birth to a boy despite supposedly being infertile. This is considered a miracle from God, and Joseph immediately becomes Jacob's favorite son, even giving Joseph a colorful favorite son cloak, effectively cucking his 10 other brothers. Unlike most cucks, though, the brothers aren't having this shit for much longer. This causes a rift in the family, and things get worse when it turns out that Joseph is having a lot of crazy dreams that can foretell the future. One of them is a dream about his brothers and the stars bowing to him, a dream that his brothers are extremely unhappy with, and turns into a massive fight involving them and their father. This leads to a plot where all of the brothers trap Joseph in a hole, and once he's out, sell him to some slave traders on their way to Egypt. And that's pretty much the first act of the movie. This is about the first 25 minutes of the film, and it's the weakest part for me, due in part to the fact that the musical numbers capture emotion really awkwardly, and the animation itself is really weird to look at as well. Certain frames and certain expressions are just overly whimsical and corny, or just awkward. It reminds me of an anime where certain characters will be frozen for seconds at a time while other characters are in motion. I get that they had a limited budget, so I don't fault them. It's just worth pointing out how weird these 25 minutes are to look at. I'm also not super into Ben Affleck's voice during these scenes. He sounds fine toward the end of the movie, but he decides to do this weird, higher-pitched, younger voice for Joseph, and good fucking God.
But Father, I want to go with them. Why do you defend them? They're not even your sons. Don't get mad at me. I didn't ask for them.
He sounds fine toward the end of the movie, but I guess Ben Affleck decided that by increasing the pitch of his voice, that's gonna work better. You know, if I sound as whiny as possible, maybe that'll take a
few years off my voice.
The music as well just isn't very good. I mean, I liked Rachel's song, but the songwriting for all of these songs is very basic for my liking.
We will teach him. I will teach him all he needs to know. He'll stand apart from other men. We'll stand beside him and together.
Things you told me all my life. I am special, I am smart, I am somehow set apart. Petty rules and limitations don't apply.
And sure, Prince of Egypt had a weak song or two, but the good ones were so phenomenal, and even then the songwriting was still commendable even for the weaker ones. But I gotta say, in this Ben Affleck movie, it's a nice contrast to have Mark Hamill as the eldest brother.
Stop it. If Father sent him, we should be happy for his help. Maybe he can do your work, Simeon. Somebody should.
This is without a doubt the best Batman v Joker scene in any animated movie.
It might even be the best Batman movie ever made.
The second act takes place in Egypt as Joseph is bought by some Egyptian royal named Potiphar. Since Joseph was well educated by his father and his hard work and intelligence set him apart from all the other slaves, Potiphar decides to give him some special treatment. And his wife has the same idea. But Joseph is a pussy and turns down Zuleika's pretty sunburnt coin slot.
And just like when I beat your bitch in Fortnite like bug spray.
me.
She falsely accused Joseph of rape and is almost put to death before she tells her husband that he's actually innocent, and she's a dirty lying sack of shit. But Joseph gets sent to jail anyway. Hooray for lady boners ruining everything! Joseph meets two people that are both having these crazy dreams that they don't understand and can't explain. Joseph has the answers though, thanks to God giving him the ability to interpret dreams. The first dude is going to be released in 3 days, while the other one is going to get executed in 3 days. And go figure, Joseph was right. But the guy that gets sent free forgets all about Joseph, and he's stuck in prison for about 2 more years.
Don't forget me! Don't forget me!
We do get a nice song and a pretty nice scene of Joseph spending the next 2 years trying to nurse a tree to good health while showing flashbacks of his life. I think this is a really nice scene, and this is actually where the movie starts to pick up for me. Potiphar returns to Joseph to tell him that Pharaoh is being haunted by a nightmare, and that he might be the only one to help. So Joseph is released from prison.
How could I have allowed this to happen? My wife...
I understand. Let's go.
Joseph is able to interpret the Pharaoh's dream, and sadly it spells bad news.
Pharaoh's dreams are one. The healthy cows and ears of grain are 7 years of abundance. But the sickly cows and the withered grain mean 7 years of famine will follow. Egypt may not survive.
Thankfully, Joseph has a plan to save Egypt, and Pharaoh makes him vizier, giving him power over all of Egypt and to take control of gathering enough food for Egypt to stay alive. And then Joseph gets married, has a few kids, and then we get a very mediocre song to follow the 7 years of harvest. And this is about where the second act ends, and I'm very thankful that things picked up from here, because I'm not sure how much longer I could take all these corny moments. Nice to see that Ben Affleck is still giving Joseph that gay-ass voice, though.
Tell him! Help me! Tell him that...
Truth be told, this is the high point of the film because it spends the most amount of time establishing what he does in Egypt, and I think it pays off just fine, especially for Joseph's character development. He goes from being just kind of a whiny brat to actually being in a position of power and just kind of being okay with his circumstances. And, I mean, he's gone through a lot, but he matured a lot better than a lot of the other people in Egypt, especially the people that threw him there in the first place. And, yeah. It was pretty good. Not as good as Moses' character development, but we'll get into that later. And then we get to the final act. All 14 minutes of it. Joseph's brothers return to buy food from Egypt, and Joseph wants to make them pay for what they did. He's convinced they're lying about their story of having a younger brother at home, so he asks them to bring him, and, well, they do just that. Jacob had another son named Benjamin, and the brothers convince the family that Joseph was killed by wolves.
How did that happen?
He was killed
Killed? How?
by wolves.
Wolves.
Yes.
Not a very convincing story after Joseph outran a pack of wolves at the beginning of the movie, but okay, sure. I'll assume the Alzheimer's caught up to Jacob so that he believed that load of bullshit. Joseph isn't all that content though, and still wants his brothers to pay the price for what they did, though it comes at the price of the brothers' confession.
Our brother was not killed by wolves. We were blinded by jealousy and sold him into slavery. For 20 years we have lived with that guilt. My father could not bear it a second time.
And this is where I felt the movie came together nicely. Joseph forgives his brothers and asks for their forgiveness for his self-righteousness, though it seems that there's no bad blood anymore.
I am your brother, Joseph.
Joseph, can you ever forgive us?
I already have.
We get a sweet reunion with Joseph and his father, and then it ends off with the best song in the movie.
You know better than I.
Now, there were a lot of issues I had with the movie outside of 4th grade songwriting, awkward animation, and Batman's whiny teenager voice, so I'll just jump right into my complaints first. I noticed that some of the character designs were really bad, especially for these side characters, like the prisoners. They just didn't feel like they belonged in this movie, and it kind of clashes with everyone else that looks halfway decent when everyone else is noticeably ugly or artistically inconsistent. I'm also a little disappointed by the fact that slavery just doesn't seem to be as bad in this movie compared to the fucking bloodbath that was Prince of Egypt. And it makes sense there, considering that it was the gravity of the plot. I get that this is telling a completely different story, but if you watch these films side by side, the slavery aspect in this is so tame that it practically doesn't even exist. Joseph goes from about 3 minutes of hard labor to being friends with his master in the blink of an eye after a happy pop song. And then during the 7 years of harvest, they reprise that song, and now everyone in Egypt is working. You have slaves for that shit, yet almost everyone comes out to work and everyone is stuck in a happy Disney musical number, and no one was unhappy or even remotely slave-like. Some of the voice acting is a little weak too. Ben Affleck gets better after he drops that gay voice that he does at the end, but holy fuck was it annoying while it was present. Jacob and Rachel and Simeon and other characters, all of them just do a very bland or basic job. Not to insult anyone, it just didn't jive with me. However, if I had to give credit to the best voice actor in the film, Mark Hamill stole the fucking show. He plays Judah perfectly, believably going from being a jealous, vindictive brother to a man burdened and tormented by his own sinful actions.
If anyone is to be punished, it should be us.
I also can't really say that I'm super into the character of Joseph compared to the Prince of Egypt. I mean, as a character, he does end the film on a strong note, but through the first 30 minutes, I just wasn't all that invested in him personally. I liked the family drama and the dynamic between him and his brothers, but once that was gone, it wasn't nearly as interesting as where he ended up after prison. In contrast to Moses, who was a very layered character throughout the film, starting out as a well-to-do prince and becoming the savior of the Israelites, a man who loses all sense of his identity once he realizes where he truly came from and what his purpose is, finding his purpose in freeing the slaves from Egypt through God's wonders, while at the same time having to deal with his conflicted brother trying to live up to his father's standards.
I will not be the weak link.
Moses felt the weight of what he had to do and what suffering was caused to the Egyptian people. He mourned and suffered because of the pain that was caused by Pharaoh's refusal. There was so much going on with Moses that I was captivated from start to finish, and I just can't say the same for Joseph. Not that he was a bad character, but compared to the previous film, he just didn't have that going for him as a standalone character for most of the film, and that did upset me. But let's stop being negative and talk about what I like. I like the fact that this movie doesn't go into detail on why Jacob went cheaper by the dozen on 3 women he never loved. Now I'm sure the filmmakers would have loved to tell our children the incredible tale about how Jacob worked for 14 years to marry his cousins and fuck their half-sisters because, hey, if we can't scrape the algae off our kiddie pools, might as well keep the gene pool nice and tidy. So they keep every detail about everyone else's mothers with as little detail as possible. But that doesn't change the fact that most of them are incest babies, including Joseph. And as I said, I really did like Mark Hamill's performance. He did an amazing job. Everyone's voices felt perfect for their character despite some of the weaker performances, though they did make up for it by doing a good job during the musical numbers. Rachel's song was well sung, and Jodie Benson's reprisal of the same song toward the end of the film was really nice, and considering you're a Disney princess, that's to be expected. Though it's surreal to see a Disney princess being turned into a DreamWorks princess, though I feel at that point that would have just been Katzenberg going into Eisner's office and stealing some pencils. It really isn't all that fucking special. Aside from that, I can't think of anything else to say other than answering the question that inspired this video. Is this a good sequel? It's fine. There's a lot holding it back from being good, but it's not a bad film by any means. For a straight-to-VHS film, it's a lot better than the competition. It has the heart and the emotion to put it above even the worst of a straight-to-VHS Disney sequel, so I'll give it that, and that's high fucking praise. So that's just my stupid, gay, autistic opinion. The movie is on Netflix if you want to check it out for yourself. It might be for you, so who knows? Don't take my word for it. And if you have any requests, be sure to leave them in the comments section or go ahead and tell me on Twitter or Discord or wherever the fuck you can find me, because I always take requests into consideration, and I hope you guys have a good night.